Well, hello again. Welcome back to the Mobile Bev Pros podcast. We are going to be riffing today on justifying premium prices. So, this is bound to be a golden episode for anybody who has ever felt like their profit margins are too low. And if they try to expand those profit margins, they don't quite have the confidence to ask for those numbers, or they feel like they're overcharging people. We even had someone mention that it felt like they were being dishonest with people when they were charging enough to live and do this job as a business and not as a charity, right? And so, Sarah, you've got some gold for us on this today.
Obviously, one of the things that we work with the most is pricing. People get into the programs, and one of the first questions they have is, okay, great, but how do I price this? How do I price this in a way that aligns with being able to sell it, being able to justify it, being able to scale it with the different variables of events? And we teach a four-part pricing model. We've done episodes on that in the past, so I'm not going to rehash that here. But even after we work people through the four-part pricing model, when they get the end results, the spreadsheets and the formula kind of spits out a number, that number is highly dependent upon the profit margin that they want to charge. And I think oftentimes, if you were just to Google it, you're going to find a whole lot of different recommendations as to what profit margin should look like. And that's largely because different industries have different norms around profit margins that they're aiming for. So, for example, when I was in the full service restaurant industry, if you had a bottom line profit margin of like 5%, in the sector of restaurants that we were in, which was casual fine dining, you were doing great. And that's after all of your overhead. It's after you've paid all of the managers. It's all that. Well, with mobile bars, we don't have 5 days a week to be operating our businesses. Well, I mean, you can ideally, but oftentimes you don't, because events are largely on the weekend. Maybe corporate, if that's a part of your strategy, you might get those on Wednesday, Thursday, maybe a nonprofit on Monday, right? But it's speckled in, it's also very seasonal. And so we could not function as a sole proprietor or even as a LLC with a pass through of 5%. That means if you make $100,000 in sales, that you get $5,000. That's just not sufficient to live off of. And why would anybody do that? Why would anybody spend their life in this relatively difficult, very physical industry for $5,000, right? So when we talk about profit margins, we talk about the number that is at the bottom line of your P&L, profit and loss statement, before you've paid yourself. And that we do that because most people don't operate their mobile bars as an S Corp or a C Corp, especially when they get started. If you did operate as an S Corp or a C Corp, you'd be taking a paycheck like everyone else. And so your P&L would show a number at the bottom post paying yourself. But since most people run it as an LLC, as a pass-through entity, that number on their P&L is the profit, which includes everything that you're paying yourself. So we want that number to be as fat as possible. But recently, I had a group client who we've really been working through confidence in their pricing, but also understanding that pricing and value, while they are similar, they are not the same. And we don't necessarily believe that in order to increase your pricing, you have to do more work. We believe that you have to increase your perceived value. And that's very challenging, I think, for people to wrap their head around when they're coming from a place of exchanging time for money or effort for money or a standard product for money. But what we are is a service, and there's lots of different ways to increase value that don't necessarily indicate having to increase how much work you do. We're working with this client, and we've been working with helping her increase her pricing by increasing that profit margin, right? So we love a 50 to 60% profit margin. That's what we're aiming for with all of our mobile bar clients, because if you make $100,000 in sales, that means that you get to keep at least 50 to 60% of it, which is $50,000 to $60,000. That's usually sufficient money in your pocket to be like, okay, what I'm doing is working. It's paying the bills. Now I can start to scale. Now I can start to quit my day job so I have more time, energy, money, resources to focus on building this business into something bigger than myself. That's where we like to get people. $100,000 in sales with a 50% to 60% profit margin. But oftentimes when you do the math and you put that 50 to 60% profit margin in there, that number is like, holy crap, I can't even afford to pay that. I wouldn't be able to hire myself. So that's the first hurdle we get people over, is the fact that, like, you're right. You probably can't hire or afford to hire yourself yet, right? We'll work you there. But the next thing that happens is that you need proof that someone's willing to pay those prices. And so in this case, one of our clients got a very wealthy couple that inquired for their wedding. And so she decided this was the perfect time to try out her new pricing. So she sent over the pricing, and the clients were like, okay, great. Thank you so much. Can we get a line item description of what's in here and what it costs? And immediately she recoiled, because she was like, oh no, if they see my breakdown, they're going to think that I'm taking advantage of them and that I'm overcharging. So there's some real mindset work, obviously, that we had the opportunity to do at that point, because what is overpriced? Honestly, you and I are people who will pay for convenience. And so what I'll pay for something has to do more with what is it saving me time wise, and what is my time worth? And my calculation there might be very different than someone else's. And so it's almost impossible to be like, this is overpriced for what it is, when we're looking at the value of convenience. And so the first opportunity that we had there was to kind of get her over the fact that, like, what she thinks is outrageously priced for something is not necessarily what someone else thinks is outrageously priced for something. The second thing was this fear of transparency. That just indicates a lack of confidence in pricing, because there should be no reason not to issue an itemized description of, like, what's included with pricing. Now, you don't have to get super granular. You don't have to share your costs. You don't have to share this has a 60% profit margin on it. This is just, if you want me to go and do these things, this is the rate of that, right? And that confidence in the fact that it's not worth it for you to go and do those things if you're not charging that amount. I had this great conversation. I was volunteering at the TEDx Nashville this past weekend, and the woman who heads the operation committee that I'm on, she owns a company that people book live music, live entertainment, and live bands through. And I had asked her kind of how the business had grown and how it was doing. And she's opened up in a new city. She's looking at another city. She has 3 bands here in Nashville area, and their rates for a live show are anywhere from $50,000 to $70,000 for a live band. And they're booked out all the time. She had this opportunity to be like, a lot of times people are shocked at our pricing, but honestly, at least 30% of that is travel and organization and operations and costuming and all of these things that make us this high-end luxury experience that nobody's really taken the time to, like, do the math, but they'll pay it because they recognize that, like, we are the vibe. Like, and mobile bars have that opportunity, but we really have to believe it on the inside that, like, we are the vibe and that they're paying for way more than just liquid in cups.
I think this is why you always say that bartending is the easiest part of what mobile bar owners do, because the mindset stuff is probably the most complex or the hardest part. And that's just my personal opinion from watching you support mobile bar owners over the years. And what I know from my practice in shadow illumination is that when you have an opportunity to up level, regardless of what it is. So for this particular client, it was her prices. The very first time, and potentially the second, third, and fourth time that you are faced with presenting this elevated version of yourself, you're going to be met with resistance. You're going to be met with opportunities to really mean it, to really stand on business. I mean, with her, it wasn't even they, I don't think, if I recall correctly, that they were like, your prices are too high, give us a line by line. They just wanted an itemized idea of why they were being charged what they were being charged. The issue was internal, right? The call was coming from within the house that she was like, oh my God, now I have to justify this. And I don't feel confident in justifying those prices. So, what are some best practices that you've seen to support mobile bar owners in the confidence piece around justifying premium prices because we have the math. You've got great spreadsheets. You do all the work in the academy, even more in-depth work in the accelerator of getting people the math on what they need to be charging to really make this business worth it. But what can they do for the confidence? I think we do a little bit of that in the accelerator. But if you have any tips or tricks, that'd be awesome.
Honestly, the math piece was my attempt to create confidence for people. I wanted them to see that like the maths. And so you can stand from a place of confidence. Might be counterproductive, honestly, looking back after utilizing the math-based approach for a few years, in that sometimes that works. Sometimes that piece is most potent when we do the math and they realize they've been undercharging, even like to break even overall. That part is powerful, but it doesn't do much in allowing people to show up from the seat of the CEO, right? Where they're holding the power card. Because now they're just leaning on the math. They're just like, sorry, this is what we have to charge. And that's okay if we're looking for just a very transactional approach to rooting people into you have to charge this or you're gonna have to close down your business. If you don't charge at least this, then 18 months from now, you're gonna be taking down your shingle because you can't afford this business. You have to go get a day job. So the math really does a good job of like waking people up and seeing, oh, okay, well, my numbers were too low. This is what I need to charge in order to do this. But then they like, what do I do with this? How do I use this and price out my services from here? How do I translate these numbers into packaging? And that's where I think the math-based approach has really broken people's ability to stand securely in their value. And so to your point, like what actionable things can we do? The next thing that I think might be even more powerful and has a bit more of the results that root this confidence in real life is for them to have proof in their field that people will pay it. So like math aside, they're still not convinced that that math will math until someone's like, yeah, sure, I'll pay you that number. Then they're like, oh, okay, the math is valid. And like, that's not how math works to begin with. Like, you don't need anyone else's permission for math to be valid. But that's what I see is that they really, even if the math is mathing, they don't believe it until someone's like, yes, I will pay you for that. All of that means nothing because we have bands out here charging $50,000 for an event that other bands are absolutely happy to charge 10 grand for. You know what I mean? And so the math means nothing ultimately. It doesn't mean anything. It's a great way for me to get people to say logically, you're not charging enough. See? But it doesn't really root the impact of value. It doesn't bring them into the premium space, which is where you realize and recognize, oh, I can charge whatever I want in this space as long as I'm coming at it from providing value. Oh, okay. Well, how do we do that? Well, then we need to figure out what our ideal clients value. Okay. Well, how do I do that? Right. And that's the real process that I think builds confidence is recognizing that the actual price doesn't matter.
So, one thing I think people might be able to do, and you've recommended this prior, and I can't remember what workshop. It was a workshop that you did that you had this specific recommendation, but it might be relevant here, is to go hang out in spaces where your ideal client is hanging out. Go sit in the lobby of the Ritz-Carlton, go have one glass of wine at the Biltmore Estate or insert other super bougie place here, and go hang out with people who have money to bend and throw around because that alone is going to help show you people are out here paying $400 for a bottle of wine for an evening out. And so that's one bottle of wine at a restaurant, right? And so your $3,000 event for them, it's also going to help you speak their language, right? That was something else that was really powerful was that when you get into these spaces, you hear the language that they're speaking, you feel the vibe and how it's different from your day to day. Because what I was picking up as you were speaking here was just people assume that everyone shops the way they shop when they go to the grocery store, right? Like when I go to the grocery store, I have two favorite spaghetti sauces, but whichever spaghetti sauce is on sale is going to win. They have to have I have standards. They have to be non-GMO, all organic ingredients. I don't want an ingredients list a mile long. But if this one's on sale and it checks all those boxes, I'm going to choose that one. But that's not how people are shopping when they're shopping for experience. That's how people are shopping when they're shopping for like the mundane, monotonous aspects of life. And so hanging out in places where your ideal client is, learning their language, really integrating the vibe of that community and recognizing that you're not shopping from your own pocket. This is not your local grocery store. It's a totally different game.
All of those recommendations, 10 out of 10 recommend, because when we start talking and speaking and pricing in the language of value, we got to remove the math and we got to change the lens and perspective that we're looking at things. And so if we're trying to attract the people who value the experience of a premium mobile bar company, they actually want to be spoken to in a totally different way. They don't want to hear things like, this is affordable, this is a great deal. That's not what they're looking for. So we don't want to reflect that language on our website, in our promotions, in our proposal. This goes back to understanding that people make decisions emotionally and they justify them logically. And so we want to catch people in an emotional space and reflect back to them the things that they value. And we can only know what they value if we know them. And that means existing in their spaces. People like to say that you are the culmination of the 5 people that you spend the most time with. So, like, look at the people that you're spending the most time with. Do they value what you do as a business, not as a transaction, not as like you fulfill the need for liquid in cups at events, but value that you're creating an experience of taste and flavor and catering to people at events that are seeking the curation of a night that is unforgettable for their guests. When we talk about photographers who charge luxury pricing, they're selling legacy. They're selling forever moments, capturing and distilling the most important days of one's life into a single image that you can then look at and relive those moments forever. That's available to mobile bars and people are already out there doing it, but that's generally not where people come into this space. They come into this space oftentimes because they're like, I can tend bar and people will pay for that. And I will be my own boss. And so that's what this looks like. And weddings need bars and corporate events need bars. And so I'm going to utilize this skill that I have of tending bar, or in some cases, when we get people that are career changers, so there may be nurses, teachers, real estate agents, they are coming into it from a place of, I know how to serve people. I've been in service to people my whole life. And so now I will just serve drinks to people, which is a much better environment to serve people because they're not dying. They're not, kids that don't even want to be there, right? They're not coming from a place of need. They're coming from a place of want. And so, like, why not serve people in places that are the best days of their lives, right? But they're still coming at it from a place of, I will transactionally support you in executing this task. Nobody is going to pay premium dollars for that perspective.
What's coming up for me as I hear you talking is mass market. One of the laws of justifying premium prices is that you can't sell to mass market. And if you yourself are a mass market consumer, you need to every now and then invest in a premium experience so that you can see what that's like, because you will not be able to sell. Mass market has its own language. And you can go back to the client seduction episode of this podcast where we talk about the language, or even the magic of buyer psychology, where we talk about this a little more in depth. But the mass market has a language, and it's things like you said, where it's like affordable, discount, accessible. Okay. Those are all mass market words. And we love that at Walmart. And so people in the premium market are not going to resonate with those words. And so you want to insert different words, right? You want to start looking at like Vogue magazine and see what language are they using. I'm sure there are tons more. I'm not a magazine reader, so I have no idea, but I'm sure there are premium magazines, premium businesses you can look at online and start really integrating that language, because they're going to be looking for like exclusivity, one of a kind, unparalleled, right? They're looking at words that raise their status and not like play to their wallet. You know what I mean? Their wallet is just a means to raising their status. And so in the premium market, to justify those prices, you want to use terminology that resonates with them and raising their status, essentially. You're not going to be able to justify premium prices to the mass market. And if you yourself have a mass market mindset, that's where you want to start, is shifting that mass market mindset.
One of the very common mission statements that we see reflected in the mobile bar industry is we elevate the bar experience or raise the bar. Okay. If you're a premium buyer, you aren't even expecting someone to raise the bar or to elevate the bar experience, because that would indicate that you were down here at any point, that was ever an expectation. So elevating the bar experience is great if you're trying to target a mass or a medium market that is looking to punch up for this event. And so if they're looking to punch up for this event, if they're looking to outdo Cousin Susie's bar that just happened at her wedding, then you're having to help them justify the additional expense to do that. They don't live there, but they're willing to punch up for this particular event. So you're going to have to educate, you're going to have to convince, all of those things, right? But when you use terminology like we elevate the bar experience, elevate it from where? You're elevating it from where everyone else expects the bar to be. And so you're saying, I'm special because we're a little bit better than the people that are executing it down here. But the people that were executing it down here were never on the short list for premium and luxury spenders. There's this online periodical that I like. Maybe it's not a periodical. It's called quintessentially.com. And when you go to their website, it says, expect the best, experience better. That's where they're coming from. They're not expecting a mobile bar company to raise the bar so that they can execute to expectations, right? They expect the best. So they want to hire people that are already there. They want to hire people that are already charging. They know their worth. They don't care what it costs. It's the experience that they want, and they expect that already. They don't want anybody who's punching up. They don't want people who are stretching beyond what everybody else is doing. They want people that are already amazing. They're already the best in class. And they want people who are comfortable working with people who expect the best in class. And you only get there by being there. So that's why I recommend people hang out in luxury spaces, experience luxury experiences, but not just be like, ooh, this feels good. I spent a lot of money. How do people talk to each other? What language is being used? What words are being used and what words are not being used? How are they dressed? How do they hold themselves? How do they walk? How do they approach conversations? All of this is going to help you define a brand that value is implied. Implied. You do not have to explain to somebody in this area as to why you're paying $70,000 for a band. This $50,000 to $70,000 is implied by them being absolutely meticulous and amazing in their execution and the way they work the room and the costuming that they wear. It's how they present themselves, how they set up, the experience of planning, who's holding the power card. If it's the person who has booked you providing all of this information, if it's the person that's booked you having to be like, what questions have I not asked, then you've already lost them. Because if you are a premium luxury value infused brand, you're driving, you're asking the questions, you're telling them what you need to know to execute at this event, you're guiding them towards the ingredients that you use and those that you refuse to use, because those don't live up to your expectations. There is one price. We're not bartering. That's it. And when you can execute and exist in that space, then you will understand why the math never fucking mattered.
I want to touch on the piece that you said about the mass market people punching up. There's a great quote in The Way of Mastery that says, the illusion cannot recognize the truth. And I think this is applicable in any elevation of consciousness, which is what we're asking people to do. When you elevate from mass market to premium market and then to luxury market, these are steps in consciousness. They're elevating how they speak, how they show up, all these things we've already said. And that elevation, there's two things that are going to happen. One, When you are walking in an elevated state, you will trigger other people's shadows who are not walking in an elevated state. And so you'll know that you're talking to a mass market buyer. One, if your messaging is nailed in, you shouldn't be talking to mass market buyers because they should just already be turned off by the time they make it through your website. But in case one creeps through because your messaging isn't dialed in, they're going to be asking you questions that mass market buyers are going to ask. They're going to have resistance to your pricing. They're going to have a lot of shadow around it, a lot of limitation around it. You're going to have to do, like you said, educating, convincing, all of those things. When you meet someone, because your messaging is dialed in, that is at an equal level of consciousness to your business, you're not going to have all those. Now, here's the thing though, if you haven't done the mindset work to demand those premium prices, you're going to meet your own shadow of mass market mindset when this occurs. And so that's what happened to our client. She found an elevated consciousness to invest in her bar services at a premium rate. And when they came back and said, we'd like a line item, immediately her shadow showed up, right? And was like, you're not good enough. How are you going to justify this? They're going to think you're taking advantage, da, 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 da. And that work, that internal work is absolutely necessary for you to go to the next level. You're never going to not meet it. New level, new devil. That's what that saying means, right? When you come up against your next level, you're going to encounter aspects of you that have to be shed. And so that mass market consciousness has to go. And so invite that and see that it's beautiful when it happens to you and you're like elevating to this next echelon and you get pushback from a elevated standpoint and there's friction somewhere in you because of that. That friction is for you, and it's for you to lean into, not run away from. I told you recently that the things in my life lately are reflecting back to me two options. I can shrink or I can expand. And it's easier for us to shrink when we are met with new devils. It's easier for us to just say, I'll take less responsibility by being less of myself, by showing up in a quieter, more palatable manner. And sure, you can do that. There are tons of people who are living completely unfulfilled lives because they just shrink at every devil, right? Or you can see the devil as the muse and you can use it to expand. And that's what's being called of you. When you're justifying premium prices and you're changing your consciousness to become a premium service in the world, that devil is there to teach you. It's there as the muse so that you can learn more about yourself and you can go to the next level.
There's a TikTok creator that I really love. Her name's Chelsea. I don't know what her handle is. I saw a TikTok yesterday from her, and it was a comment. The woman had done a video showing them around her favorite part of her house, which was like this custom built-in library, which is like drool worthy, that she had custom designed. And then in the middle of it, she had kind of created a little carve out for her bar, and it had this like New York vintage style wallpaper behind it. And a commenter said something like, OMG, that wallpaper is $660 per panel, cry face. And Chelsea responded to that and was like, perhaps you're new here. One thing you need to know about me is I will never invest in cheap items. She said, I don't buy cheap things. I don't necessarily buy expensive things for the sake of buying expensive things, but I will always invest in quality and what I love. And yes, this wallpaper was $660 for this one panel. I only bought one panel. I only used one panel. I adore it. And I do not regret a single penny spent on any of this. She's like, my clothes are top quality. My jewelry is top quality. My furniture is top quality. And she's like, I'm not going to apologize for the way that I spend my adult money. I share that story because, to your point, when you show up from places like that, where you're not in your shadow around what you value and how you spend your money, it will trigger other people who are in their shadow, who can't even fathom spending that kind of money on a single piece of wallpaper. When you show up as a mobile bar that has premium pricing because you value what you do and you know that what you bring is of value, you will absolutely have in your field people who are like, oh, that's so expensive. How can you justify? And to me, the response there is, I don't justify it. There's no reason for me to justify it because these are my rates. This is what I require in order to do this valuable premium level work in the world. And there are examples everywhere. We love to give the example of Corbin with Night Owl Coffee. He's a premium coffee cart service. does not justify his pricing. He just exists in the premium space in a way that signals to the rest of the world that he is worth every single penny. And indeed, he is, because the experience of Night Owl is just that. You cannot get a Night Owl experience with anyone else. Now, that doesn't mean there isn't space for other people in the coffee cart world who also exist and target those premium level prices and those premium clients who are seeking their brand and their version of what it looks like to want and to get premium level coffee service. There absolutely is.
Yeah, and you'll know that you've made the transition because when you get pushback from people in their shadow, you won't be triggered by it anymore. And a lot of us inherited shadow consciousness around wealth and expansion and premium markets. And if you didn't come from money and you're listening to this podcast, you're doing the work of generations. The example that I'll give is that, like, I grew up making honest money. My dad was a housekeeper and a terraformer. Okay. And that was honest money, hard work. If you want more money, you do more work. That's how that the mass market is literally mass, like do more to make more money, right? And that consciousness was given to us by people who had limitation. And so you're doing the work of generations by elevating beyond that. And so your example of the TikTok creator who is like, I'm not going to apologize for affording the best. Anybody could do that. Anybody can go to that next level of consciousness. It's available to anybody who's listening. And if you're listening and you're like, that sounds too far fetched, there's no way, I'm just going to take on more clients to make money. This is for you. And unfortunately, your shadow is going to keep you from really hearing this until you're ready to receive it and to integrate it. So listen to this episode a couple more times, get all that good friction going, because what's available to you is a next level of self. This isn't just about premium pricing, right? And you say you don't justify it. The name of this podcast is How to Justify Premium Prices. And the answer to that question is that you don't. When you live in value, you don't need to justify it to anyone. And that's where we really want to see people, because that's where wealth is actually created. And not just monetary wealth, but personal wealth, as in confidence, as in creative energy, as in fulfillment, these things that money can't buy. That all comes along with this upper echelon of consciousness.
At Mobile Bev Pros in the Academy, the starting rate is $159 a month, which is, for a lot of people, we see this, they'll apply or they'll reach out and they'll say, man, I would love to join. I just can't justify the expense of $159. You have a competitor in this market who's only charging $39 per month. What makes you so much more expensive? And we don't justify it. We don't give bullet points as to why we're more expensive. We don't break down how and why we arrived at $159, because we, like other people in your field that you will encounter in your journey to expand, will ask of you to put into practice expansion. If you want to go and sit at a table with a bunch of millionaires, they will charge you to be at that table. If you want to sit at the foot of a mentor who has achieved what you want to achieve, they will ask of you to invest in that seat, whether it is time, whether it is in devotion, whatever it is, they will ask of you to invest in order to prove to yourself that you want to expand into that space. And so there's a fee. Unfortunately, it doesn't have to be monetary, although oftentimes it is, because, you know, if you want to fly first class, those tickets are more expensive. If you want to stay at the Ritz-Carlton, those tickets are more expensive. If you want to be in the space of exchanging money for value, there is a price tag. Likewise, it invites you to charge more for what you're providing to people in the name of value, not in the name of math.
Yeah, it's as simple as adding $159 to your monthly event that you'll secure whenever you join the academy, right? And then whenever you get into the accelerator, maybe you start tacking on that price, because that's part of doing business. there's a stigma around my particular ecosystem. I work in the spiritual, metaphysical, subconscious realms, right? And there's a stigma in that industry that it should be free. Spirituality should be free. And spirituality is actually free. Do it yourself, you know, free. By free, I do want to put a little asterisk there because it's going to take you years. Okay. No one is just like, I'm spiritual. And then that's the end of it. I mean, that is enlightenment. You could do that. And then there's years of unpacking all the stuff that comes up when you are spiritual, right? And for a long time, I let that stigma hold me back. And like my prices, I would be like, oh, let me shrink down, let me get smaller. But you're right, we're calling people to expansion. And there's this old story about this guy who wanted to learn from this Tao master. And the Tao master wasn't anybody significant. He was just a regular dude in town, but everybody knew that guy's enlightened. Go see him. And there's this guy that wanted to learn from this mentor. And every day he would show up and he would ask the Tao master to teach him. And every day the Tao master would ignore him. Not very spiritual, this enlightened fella, I would say. He just ignored him. And what happened was the man eventually realized that the Tao master was asking him to show up and give sacrifice of some level, right? If it's not monetary, it's time, or to your point, it's devotion. And so this guy picked up a broom and every day for like 3 years, he swept with this Tao master. He just did what the Tao master was doing. And the Tao master said not shit to this guy, nothing. And after 3 years, he turned and looked at him and said, now you're ready. And then they began the work. And so even when we're not asking, whether it's spiritual or it's business or whatever, even if they're not asking for monetary investment, there's an investment. If you go and buy leggings that are super cheap material and like it costs you nothing, what's the investment there? Potentially your hormones. Who knows what's in those leggings because they were made from synthetic material, right? There's investment or sacrifice required for anything you want in life. The premium and luxury spaces understand that that sacrifice is inherent and they're willing to sacrifice for what they value. And that's the game you want to play in. You want to get to a space where people are willing to sacrifice for what they value, as opposed to in the mass market where we often sacrifice what we value for affordability, for accessibility. And that's a whole different topic, but you don't want to play in that space. That space is dangerous and it'll have you living out of integrity.
I love that you brought up the accelerator because oftentimes we do, and I say often, it's probably about 30% of the time, we get people who do say, absolutely, I'm willing to invest the $497 a month to tap into the accelerator and the additional support there. And then we support them additionally in leveling up. And then usually around the 3-month mark, about 30% of people are like, can I exit? I feel really challenged. I don't know that I can do this. You basically made me question everything about my business and I have no bearings or orientation any longer. I feel like I need to go back to the drawing board and really figure this out. And what's happening there is that we're asking them to expand into the place that they said they wanted to expand. And they get there and they realize that they are so uncomfortable in this place of expansion that they can't bring themselves to continue to do that work. And there's no penalty. Go ahead and back out. Now you know this is available to you, right? Now you know the space in which you could play if you really were willing to do that work. So yeah, they made a monetary investment, but they weren't willing to make that sacrificial investment, the
energetic investment.
yeah, exactly. On paper, it looked like the life that they wanted. But then when we presented them with that opportunity, they very much were like, that's too big for me. I'm not comfortable being that big. Flip side, the other 70% get in there and they're like, holy moly, quantum level growth. Because not only am I able to see what's available for me, I have the support necessary from people who believe in that version of me and can reflect back to me when I'm in shadow about that new expansion. Our weekly check-in and check-outs are just so gorgeous because we get to watch this process of them identifying a shadow And then by the end of the check-in, they've worked themselves through the shadow. They know exactly what happened and how to progress through it the next time, right? And that process of this is what held me back, which is one of the questions that we ask, and this is how we're going to shift that moving forward. These people are making huge strides in those very same 3 months that others are like, too much, too soon, cannot do it.
Like I said, in my field recently, I have an opportunity to shrink or to expand. And when you're not attuned to growth, which is very uncomfortable, it's most natural for you to shrink. And we see that a lot. And we're not in the business of, we don't want anybody to grow before their time. And so I want to be really clear that if you're somebody who is confronted with growth and you tend to shrink, that's your path right now. And when you're ready to expand, it's going to get wildly uncomfortable really fast. Like you said, even just in the 3 month mark, they're like, maybe I should burn this all down because maybe I'm not actually cut out for what I thought I wanted. And you are cut out for it, but maybe not right now, you know? And so that process of bringing awareness to what's required for you to expand can be really uncomfortable. And then the required actions that you'll take to expand are wildly uncomfortable. But again, that new devil is the muse. It's there for you and for your ultimate growth. And you can see it as an opportunity to shrink and be smaller, or as an opportunity to grow and expand. And of course, we want people to grow and expand when they're ready, when the time is right for them. And so we are no stranger to death doula-ing businesses. We do that regularly where people come in and they're like, actually, this is not the game for me. But if it is the game for you, we invite you to apply for the accelerator. We have an amazing group of expanders in there currently who are doing the damn thing. They're securing 5-figure deals that they never thought were possible, securing long-term contracts with massive brands. And this is all stuff they thought wasn't possible for them either, but they're doing the damn thing. And so if you're ready to get wildly uncomfortable and stop justifying prices, that's the least of your worries, by the way, we recommend the accelerator for that.
And if you're not quite ready for the accelerator, but you want to tap into some of this logic-based information and math, we also have the Academy, which has all the learning. And so it'll jumpstart your mobile bar journey by condensing down only what you need to know, only what you need to be executing on in order to get your mobile bar to a place where it is 6 figures in sales, or if you're already at that point, 6 figures in profit. Because let's be honest, we are in this business to make money. Yes, personal growth, but we are in this business to make money. And that money is a lot easier to make than you think because we have a high demand industry. People want bars and beverages at events. They've always wanted that. A good portion of the work out there does want more. They want the bar experience that they expect and that they may struggle to find in their local area. And so the demand is there. And if what you're seeking is a little bit more information on how to get there, because maybe you don't have a background in business, you don't have a background in marketing or sales, operations, leadership, all of that information is in the Academy. I do weekly office hours, which is kind of like group coaching sessions for people who have questions that are not necessarily specified in the Academy. It's a great time. It's a tool that over 1,500 mobile bars have used to catapult themselves into success. And it is a tried and true proven program. And so the value of that in and of itself justifies the investment.
Another awesome episode. Sarah, thanks so much for having me on. We'll talk to you guys on the next one.